All right, well, we have a number of questions, so I am going to read the questions and I'll say for whom they're for or if they're for everybody. There was even a question for me. And it was, did we advertise at all to other local churches that the Kleins would be here this evening? And the answer is we didn't advertise real broadly. We're glad to see a few of you here from other churches. I did invite pastors from the other local congregations, but just because of our limited space, we primarily invited our congregation and our sister churches in Spokane and in Colville. But we're very grateful for those of you who made it here from other congregations. So very glad that you're here with us tonight. So the first question is one for the Kleins. Please describe your middle son's first birthday cake.
That's
Okay.
you. Yes, loud.
Okay. I did a 2-tiered cake, and I did it sky blue, and I did little buildings, like where it looked like the city, in cookies, and frosted them like a dark purple color, and then did yellow for like the windows with the lights, and that wrapped around each tier of the cake. And then I made out of sugar cookies little cars and a train, and the train went around the bottom of the cake and the cars went on the top. And then out of the top of the cake...
How long did it take to make this cake?
A long time. And out of the top of the cake was a little airplane with a number 1 on it and some clouds. So.
All right, Doug, you have to rise to that level of creativity.
Same thing, only 5 layers.
People today, Doug, sincerely believe that refusing to serve gays is equivalent to refusing to serve blacks. How can you convince them that it's not?
The first thing I would say is I would attack that phrase at the beginning, sincerely believe. Right? We live in a touchy-feely time where my emotions trump everything. Right? So if you want to argue, if you want to point to the law, if you want rules of evidence, no, what matters is you hurt my feelings. Mm-hmm. Well, the problem is that in every society, there's a justified class and an unjustified class. Justification is a theological category, but justification means, in biblical theology, the justified are in the perfections of Christ. They are completely exonerated. They're cleared. That's why we can go to heaven being imperfect, as God looks at us and sees the perfections of Jesus Christ. That's justification. Well, societies work the same way. So, for example, just to see, so you can see how social justification works, the Charlie Hebdo magazine in France, where the Muslim radicals attacked it and killed a number of the people there at the magazine. It was a tragedy, and so, and all over Europe, there were the Je suis Charlie, I am Charlie, I'm standing with them. But the Charlie Hebdo magazine, and this is in no way justifying what happened to them, but the Charlie Hebdo magazine were basically the Westboro Baptists of the left. Okay, the Westboro Baptists are the ones who show up at funerals with signs that say God hates fags and that sort of thing. If they're at a military funeral and they're doing that, and some father who'd lost his son in the war got angry and drove his truck into the Westboro Baptist protesters and killed some of them, nobody would be saying, I stand with the Westboro Baptists, because they're not justified. They're messed up, and they're not only messed up, but they don't receive the justification status that other people receive. So the Charlie Hebdo people, they're justified. The Westboro Baptists are not justified. If the Charlie Hebdo people sin, their sin is covered. Right? I saw one cover that they did that was beyond beyond anything that the Westboro Baptists have ever done. Just awful, awful. But they're justified, and the Westboro Baptists are not justified. So what happens here is if a couple of lesbians come into the shop and their feelings are hurt, right? Their complaint is taken seriously, all right, because they belong to the justified class. Your feelings are not taken seriously at all, even though the damages done here are genuine and real, and that any normal person would experience, and the other feelings are just manufactured, made up. But they're taken seriously and these not, because every society has to have a justified class and a group that's rejected. Currently, evangelical Christians are the ones who are rejected. If I could add one other thing onto this about, you mentioned being lied about, the experience of being lied about in court when you have to sit there in
Again, biblical.
don't be. Jesus says in Matthew that when you're despitefully used and people say all kinds of evil things about you, he basically says, go around the corner and dance a little jig. Because you know finally you're doing something right. And then in 2 Peter, sorry, 1 Peter. There we go. But if ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. So the Spirit of glory rests on people who are lied about for Jesus' sake.
Amen. Amen.
That feels good.
All right, that was a pretty good tiered cake. Here's just a practical question. Did the fundraiser site allow you to keep the $110,000? What happened with that?
The way that works is GoFundMe was more than happy to take their cut, even though they didn't want to continue the campaign. So they got their percentage, 7.98, I believe it is. The people that saw it taken down got a large amount refunded. By the time it was all said and done, it's a company called WePay that actually distributes the funds. They do a transaction charge. We got right around $92,000, which the federal government will take about 30%, state government will take about 10%, so about half.
Yeah.
Which is good. We got something.
Yeah.
It's good, but it's also evil.
Yes, yes.
Doug, why not go on the offensive and establish case law by suing homosexual and, can't read that one, and Muslim bakeries when they refuse to serve Christians?
Well, actually, some people are doing that sort of thing. They're going into shops owned by lesbians and asking them to bake a cake with a verse from Leviticus on it, or and what happens? There was a guy in Colorado. What did he do? It was a Colorado bakery, and a Christian went into the bakery and asked for something like that to be done, and he had a fine applied to him, the guy who asked.
Yeah.
Right.
They went
Right.
the reverse.
They went the other way.
Yeah.
So, and this is an illustration of if you're justified, if you're justified, you can't do anything wrong,
Yeah.
and if you're not justified, you can't do anything right. These people don't care about consistency; they care about winning.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Do you hear or have any support from the ACLJ? Jay Sekulas.
Jay
Seculo?
Seculo.
Secular, sorry.
What I've noticed with the ACLJ, Jay Seculo, Jordan Seculo, they have distanced themselves from this whole gay marriage issue in this country. They're more than happy to stand with Israel. For instance, Saeed over in Iran. I mean, that my heart breaks for that guy. He's fighting the fight. I mean, and they're really outspoken about that. They've really distanced themselves from this, and I think it kind of comes down to that whole thing that a lot of Christians do, where they don't want to be outspoken on something that is not culturally I can't even say it, is not popular in the culture. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I need more coffee today. Anyway, so for instance, a lot of churches, including my own pastor, would not want to speak out overtly about this whole gay marriage issue for fear of retribution. And I think the ACLJ is dealing with that same kind of issue.
Yeah. Okay. Doug, does your reference to saying no include the legal concept of nullification? If so, how does this pertain to your reference to the men in the Book of Chronicles? What does this restoration look like? Things like that.
Okay. Yes, it does include nullification. There's a. Let me give you two examples of what nullification looks like, and one would be state nullification that I was talking about with Roe v. Wade, where the federal government says to do something and the state just says no, we're not going to do that, and that it actually works. So a number of years ago, there was a federal law passed requiring national ID, something like that, ID cards, and all the states said no, not going to do it, and that was that, right? It was dutifully passed, and everybody said no, we're not going to do it. So the nullification works. You can't, if everybody says no at the same time, you can't round everybody up and put them all in prison, right? And so nullification works. That's a state level thing. There's a good book by Thomas Woods called Nullification. So I'd recommend that on state level. Another example of how nullification works, and this is not people becoming anarchists. This would be an example of people understanding what a free legal tradition actually looks like. All right, so for example, jury nullification is another type of nullification. When a jury is convened, the jury in Anglo-Saxon case law, going all the way back, the convened jury is sitting in judgment on the accused and on the law. Okay, so the jury nullification is you bring somebody in, you've arrested him, you caught him dead to rights, violating law XYZ, and if the jury thinks that law XYZ is a stupid law or an unconstitutional law, they just refuse to convict. And there's absolutely nothing that can be done about it if you come back with a not guilty verdict. Well, the thing there's an irony about this, and again, the people don't care about consistency; they care about winning. Years ago, I was called up for jury duty. I have no idea how I was selected for the jury because I told them that I believed in jury nullification. It was a murder trial, so in this case, I wasn't going to sit in judgment on the law, but that was the situation. When I was in the jury pool, they showed us this inspirational video about how juries were part of the backbone of our liberties. And they were a key instrument in our battle against Great Britain's tyranny in the War for Independence, which they were. And the reason they didn't say how, but they just said juries, 3 cheers for juries back in the 1700s. But the reason they were is back in the 1700s, American juries would not convict smugglers. Right, so the British passed laws against smuggling. They'd catch a smuggler, they'd bring him in, he'd have to be tried by a jury of his peers, Americans, and they would come back not guilty. Well, over and over and over again. So our juries fought against unjust and tyrannical laws by refusing to convict on the basis of them. Then, after I was selected for the jury, the judge sat us all down and said, we were not allowed to, instructed the jury, you're not allowed to think for yourself, and you have to do absolutely everything I say. Right? So it was an instance of this court system telling me 3 cheers for the tombs of the prophets, right? But we're not going to let you inquire too closely into what that prophet actually did. And we're going to then, in our next move, deny everything that he stood for. So that's nullification. Basically, we have to become a lot more uncooperative than we currently are.
Okay. Have you had any contact with Baronelle Stutzman or met her?
Yeah, we actually had breakfast with her on
Yesterday.
yesterday morning before we came here.
That would count.
There we go.
She's definitely a very sweet lady, and we keep in contact, and we email, and we encourage each other. So it's nice. So.
Okay. Good. And this says we are praying for you.
Aww.
So.
Thank you.
Doug, these two questions are similar. It seems that we generally have four options when faced with compulsory violation of our consciences and the possible consequences: submit and obey, disobey and submit to the punishment, disobey and resist the punishment nonviolently, or disobey and resist the punishment with force. That said, my question is, can you unpack how we should think about each of these options? Give an example or guiding principle regarding how or what, when we should follow each of these courses.
It's a 10-layer cake.
This is a 10-layer cake. And so this one, in similar vein, was, when does nonviolent civil disobedience shift to a defensive armed posture in light of events?
Okay, let me say, in the first question, out of all four, the answer is all of those, basically, except for what was the first one again?
Submit and obey, disobey and submit,
Okay,
disobey and resist punishment.
all but the first one, submit and obey. If it's a tyrannical, unjust law that binds your conscience, it's judge for yourselves, it says in Acts, whether we should obey you or God. So if it comes down to this thing and they're trying to get you to disobey God, it's got to be some form of disobedience. It has to be some form of disobedience.
So one's off the table.
One is off the table, but the other three are all options depending on what your circumstances are. Right? You dance with the one what brung you. So if you're an early Christian and you are going to be thrown to the lions, you don't have any options but to not deny Christ and be thrown to the lions. But there's no capital there. There's no cultural basis for effective resistance, and willingly going to martyrdom is the seed of the church, and that's what God uses. So sometimes you just refuse to comply, and they do what they do to you. That's how Jesus died, right? Jesus was led as a lamb is led to the slaughter. He didn't open his mouth. So we in some circumstances we imitate Christ in that circumstance. Going to the second question, the reformers developed a theology of resistance that we need to recover, and the theology of resistance was threefold. How do we resist ungodly tyranny like this? Number one, we preach and prophesy against it. A prophetic word from the pulpit, prophetic word from the John Knoxes that we pray that God would raise up, who would testify to the established rulers that their deeds are evil. So you prophesy against the evils. The second stage, the reformers said, was to flee. Jesus said, when you're persecuted in one town, flee to the next. So flight is, and that's how our country was settled, right? Our country was settled by people who loved Jesus and who loved freedom and who came here in obedience to number two. Our problem today is there's nowhere to go. We could go to the moon. Where are you going to go? So they had the option of fleeing, and that's what they did. The third option was taking up arms defensively. It's never acceptable to try to overthrow the existing authorities, and that's the option that King David took before he was king. So here's a question: did David respect the existing authorities? Yes. He refused to kill Saul when he had a chance. He refused to take his life. His conscience smote him when he cut off a corner of his robe. He respected the Lord's anointed. He also was exceedingly non-compliant with what the Lord's anointed wanted him to do. He was running around Judah with an armed band of 600 people, and he was prepared to defend himself defensively, but he was not prepared to launch an attack against Saul. So three, prophetic witness, flee, and then defensive resistance when everything else has been tried.
Okay, good. Let's follow up. There was a question that you reminded me of. And it's this. Can you relocate your bakery to another state, your business to another state? And have you considered that?
Or secede.
Pennsylvania.
Kleinsylvania.
Yeah, opening up the bakery in Oregon, unless we win this case on appeal and set this almighty case law that says that the state can't do this, I'd have another complaint filed within a week, guaranteed. So we wouldn't do it in the state of Oregon unless we win this. Another state, I'm weighing my options. I've had offers. She's got to be in it because, let's be honest, I don't have an artistic bone in my body. So, you know.
But you baked the cakes.
Well,
I heard.
that's the miracle of God. But yeah, we've definitely thought about it. I mean, we love the state we live in as far as the beauty of it. I mean, I'll be honest, the politics in the state is just, I mean, if you like that, you have to be a whack job. I mean,
We're definitely open though. If the Lord wants us to open up somewhere else and, you know, opens those doors for us, then we definitely would do it. So.
Yeah.
If you move to another state, you should name your shop Cakes from a Free Country.
That's a good idea.
All right,
sweet cakes
so
of freedom.
this is kind of a factual question. Is not sodomy a felony in Idaho? And what significance may or may not that have?
It used to be. I know it used to be. I think if it is now, it would simply be a dead letter.
Yeah.
So I remember looking it up for some reason 20 years or so ago, and yes, it was a felony at that time. But it was a felony in almost all. At the same time, it was a felony in virtually all 50 states, and so this is a telling example of how quickly a house of cards can go down. So
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Is your or was your business incorporated? Would the outcome have been different if you had operated as individuals? What was the situation there?
She had it set up as a sole proprietorship. I looked into, because the fact that the DOJ rejected the complaint, I did not have a formal complaint filed against me at the time. I looked into doing an LLC.
You filed for it.
I actually filed for it. The state of Oregon screwed it up. What I later found out, doesn't matter. The state called me an individual. So, meaning that they're not prosecuting Sweet Cakes by Melissa. They're holding Sweet Cakes by Melissa financially liable, but they're coming after me personally. Now, how the Bureau of Labor and Industry comes after an individual, well, chalk that up to administrative law. That's, again, we just make it up as we go and run with it.
Doug, it's not only glorifying professions. Teachers, nurses, and others have lost their jobs over Facebook posts or statements in church 5 years before. Any comments on that? And
Yes, the point is not that this persecution is going to be limited to glorifying professions. I was attempting to explain why it has begun there, why that's the first contact, why this is the first major set of controversies. It's coming to the rest of the church. Anybody who thinks it's not going to affect the pulpit is crazy, right? Anybody who thinks it's not going to affect what you teach in your Christian school is crazy. They're setting all the forces in motion to get approval from every church, every school, every Christian. It's not enough to just do it with the glorifying professions.
Well, you can look to Canada. Canada is probably about 4 years ahead of us. And, yeah, it's hate speech, everything's there.
All right.
If I could add one thing, all the hate speech stuff, one of the reasons why I've been so vocal on my blog using certain terms is James tells us in James chapter 3 that the tongue is not just a spark that can burn down big forests, but the tongue is a rudder that steers a ship. What they are demanding is control of the dictionary. They are demanding control of language. They're demanding control of what you're allowed to say. And I've decided a number of years ago that everything they don't want me to say, I'm going to make a point of saying. And I'm going to make a point of saying it over and over and over again. Because George Orwell wrote a great essay on the politics of the English language. Newspeak, doublespeak, all the stuff that goes on in 1984 it's upon us now.
Come here, sweetie.
Which one's that?
That's Michael.
That's Michael.
That's the absolute youngest one of ours.
Okay.
By 3 minutes.
By 3 minutes. All right, I don't know who I asked that question of, so I lost track. Have you considered, so I guess that you already answered this one.
Making pies.
We've made pies.
It is, have you considered reestablishing as a non-enumerated entity, LLC or other, therefore not under governmental jurisdiction? There are many large and small enterprises currently functioning quite well under the so-called radar, but apparently you're saying they went after you.
There was definitely ways in which if we'd have saw this coming, we could have set it up that probably would have shielded us from it. But quite honestly, in this situation, this goes beyond me. This goes beyond her. This goes to the extent of we've got a gal down in Canby, Oregon, who had a wedding chapel that was being used as a church every Saturday night, who has now got a complaint filed with the Bureau of Labor and Industry because 2 lesbians came and toured the facility and said, "I'm marrying her. Is this a problem for you?" And there you go. It doesn't matter. Somebody's going to get hammered with it. We have to do something. We have to change what is going on in this country, and we have to start right now because we're getting our rights stripped away left and right, and we're just sitting back on our laurels and just watching it happen.
And it doesn't matter how you're legally configured if no one in town will do business with you because they're all intimidated, right? So the persecutors are always going to figure out a way to get at you. You're not going to be able to defend yourself on legal technicalities.
You mentioned, Doug, the importance of evangelicals having a united voice. So how does the greater evangelical church mobilize its voice? How do we speak as one?
I've suggested this. This is something I suggested on my blog. And we need. I've got a question for you all first. I understand that Samaritan's Purse is processing gifts for you all. Is that right?
They cannot process gifts for us. They can process gifts for persecuted Christians in America.
Okay.
It's been, Franklin jumped the gun, didn't talk to his attorneys, put that up on his website. I don't know how much was donated. I don't know if any. I don't know how many people took a refund. I don't know any of that. I just know that he flew his attorney out to our house and he said, Franklin wants to help you guys, but his hands are tied by bureaucracy. So that's kind of where we're at.
All right. So one of the things we need is an evangelical GoFundMe, an evangelical operation that is dedicated to cases like this, because it's going to be more and more.
Okay. On that note, Continue to Give is a crowdfunding source that stepped forward. They're based out of Wisconsin. The guy contacted me and he said, I was at a men's group. We were talking about standing, and you guys came to mind. And I thought, well, we could all say we're going to stand, but if we were actually asked to do it, how would that look? Would we actually do it? He goes, I want to come alongside you guys. I want to set. So they actually set one up, and they're catching flack for it.
What's the name of it?
Continue to Give.
Continue to Give. Well, one of the things we ought to say, and ask people like Franklin Graham and people with access to the microphone, we ought to say to the homosexual activists, every one of our people, if you pick any one of our people and target them the way you did, it's going to be for that couple, as far as we're concerned, like winning the lottery. Right. That might stop them if we say, oh, you open a bakery, please let the homosexuals come after me. Because American evangelical Christians have the financial resources to do exactly that. Right? I just read an article my daughter forwarded to me that one of the complaints was filed. Well, you evangelical Christians are just all about opposing same-sex unions and pro-life stuff, but you don't care about other regular poor people, etc. And someone wrote an article, op-ed, I think it was for the Washington Times, that went through and counted up how much evangelical Christians give to poverty relief, medical missions, that sort of thing. And evangelical Christians in North America, if we were a country, would be the 12th largest donor in the world as a country, right? So what we give to poverty relief all over the world is in the billions. And fighting pro-life issues and homosexual issues, it's under $1 billion, it's not like $700 million. We have a lot of resources, we have a lot of people who love Jesus, we just need to be coordinated. And so consequently, we ought to have one place to go when this sort of thing flares up. Go to this website, and you can bet your bottom dollar that site will be attacked. Right? Their license is going to be taken away. And the opposition doesn't care about fighting dirty. They'll fight dirty, but we just have to keep doing it.
Doug, how's the bakery situation any different from a business that posts no shirt, no shoes, no service?
Well, the one is justified, the other's not justified. So, right, legally, I believe that anybody in a shop should be allowed to serve anybody he wants and refuse service to anybody he wants for whatever reason. I don't think we ought to be restricting that by law. That means that you might get some Bubba's Ribs place down in South Texas that refuses to serve people of color because of his bigotries. That's part of the cost of doing business in a free country. But we ought not to have any laws mandating such bigotry, right? The problem with segregation was that it was all legally imposed. The government schools were established as segregated schools by law. So the takeaway is we shouldn't trust legislators. You with me?
I've watched every time I watch a legislator or anybody, they run on a platform and they get into office, and the first thing they do is go back on everything they just said. So, yeah, I don't trust them.
Right.
All right, this is for the clients, and then Doug, you can jump in on this one. So 2 more questions, and then we'll be done. I'm a member of a string quartet that plays weddings. We've agreed to refuse LGBT events. We're not incorporated or organized in any business manner. We operate as individuals. On occasion, we're booked by a music store in the area. Ownership of that also will not schedule LGBT weddings. They fear that this issue could jeopardize their retail business. Any suggestions for how to shield us and the store?
As individuals without a business license, might be in the clear. As far as the store goes, I can't. It's public accommodations law. I mean, it's probably just a problem waiting to happen.
My string broke. Or another thing you could do is you could tune one string half a step down, the next one half a step up, the next one a little bit flat, and the other one a little sharp, and stink it up.
And honestly, that's what caused me so much problems, or so many problems. I was honest. If I had lied to this girl and just said, "Oh, I totally forgot we're out of town that week," I wouldn't be in the mess I'm in right now, because in fact a caterer did that to them about this same event. Now, they didn't go after the caterer, although they both openly said in court that, we were discriminated against by this lady. Well, they didn't have a leg to stand on because she lied and said she was booked up, I'm sorry, the Bible tells me not to bear false witness, not to lie. I told the truth. Well, dang it, the state's going to come after me for telling the truth now.
Right. All right, final question, Doug. How soon would you recommend that churches that are 501c3 organizations look into rescinding that status? And why?
I think, it's never too soon to start looking into it. right? You don't want to start developing your theology of this 3 months into your court case.
Right.
So you want to think it through now. You want to read your books now. You want to do the research now. I'm not a, although I live in North Idaho, I'm not a purist on these things. I do believe that there's some place for legal constructs, corporations, et cetera. But our church is not a corporation, because a corporation is a creature of the state. And I don't want, the head of the church is the Lord Jesus. And I don't want the head of the church to be the Secretary of State of the state of Idaho. That's theologically suspect. So Jesus is the head of the church. So I would encourage, and in Idaho, at any rate, churches that function as associations can own property. We're an association, not a corporation. We can own property. We can buy and sell property. We're recognized by the state of Idaho. And the IRS code recognizes us. People who give donations to us can claim that on their taxes, and et cetera. Different states are in different categories. So check with a liberty-loving attorney, okay, and pursue it. So it's not too. I would encourage everybody to start researching now. Everybody in Christian leadership needs to start reading on this now, because it's on the horizon. It's getting closer. We're here.
All right, well, thank you very much.